Hello, everyone. Welcome to IAB's Brand Disruption Summit panel, Programmatic and Addressable TV for All, how to modernize media buying across today's convergent TV and video platforms. My name is Eric John. I head up IAB's Media Center, and we have an extraordinary panelist, 5 panelists all together who are going to help us unpack the current state of programmatic buying, selling, and the future of addressability in TV in all forms. So let us kick this off with our cast of players here. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself, what you do, what your day gig is, and then we'll go around the horn.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Stockton. I'm the SVP of Video Innovation at Dentsu. So I lead up all advanced TV and digital video and connected TV strategy across all of our Dentsu clients.
Perfect. John, over to you.
Jonathan Halvorson. I'm the Global VP of Consumer Experience for Mondelēz International, the world's largest snacking company.
Super. Stephen.
Hi, Stephen Jutras. I'm the General Manager of Product and Programs for Dish Media and basically run all projects and platforms for Dish Media.
Great. And Chris, to you.
Hi, Chris Maccaro with Beachfront Media. I'm the CEO. And at Beachfront, we're focused on building a technical infrastructure to allow interoperable buying and selling of TV inventory between streaming and linear TV.
Super. Well, so this panel and this event is kind of propitious in a way. We've just come through 18 months of really interesting, challenging times for any marketer. Our audience of brands and buyers are going to be very curious for what is possible today in the realm of programmatic, and probably also importantly, looking to gain a better understanding of what addressable actually means, addressable TV. So I'd love this to be a kind of what you can take away and actually put to work with, tomorrow at your shop. So let's start actually, if we could, with just a recap from each of you of like, what have the last 18 months kind of brought and wrought to your day-to-day business? And then we're going to talk about what some of the specifics are about programmatic and addressable TV, and because we can get pretty steeped in our own language. But Brad, why don't we start back with you? What have been the big lessons over the past 18 months in your biz here?
Yeah, it's really funny. In the advanced TV world, when this first pandemic really kicked off and happened, we kind of all took a step back from advertising. We all paused. The first thing you really cut down on is innovation right away. I think once we all realized what was happening, what was going on, and we had to figure out our new ways of working, I think innovation just slingshot back to the forefront with the adoption of streaming and everything happening on how we want to be people-based first. I think innovation is actually now at the forefront because of the pandemic and expedited the timelines on a lot of different projects. I think we had to find new ways of working. We're not sitting in a conference room figuring it out. We're sitting on a Zoom, but we're finding new ways of coming together. And quite frankly, I think it's really now about how do we find the right audience on the right platform at the right time with the right message. So I think real innovation has really come to the forefront with both technology, advertisers, and our agencies really making sure we lean in to what's available and make sure we're always pushing the envelope on the next new activation medium that's going to be in the space, whether that's programmatic TV and ... on definition, which we'll get into, and how addressable really comes to life, both from beyond just MVPDs, but then across all ways of activating on the glass.
John, so Brad just mentioned brands and buyers. I mean, from the brand perspective, you have a house of brands that everyone knows, from Oreos to Trident. How has the process or the way you've addressed consumers changed in the past 18 months?
I think you have to see a lot of shifts in it. And I think it's caused certainly by the shifts in consumer behavior and also the marketplace dynamics. So I think Brad talked a lot about what are the shifts in consumers and the fact consumers are moving into streaming away from, and part of a continual shift or an acceleration to shift away from linear. But you also have a marketplace dynamic. And ultimately, the challenge for advertisers is to efficiently and effectively connect and build relationships with consumers. And why television has always been one of its most effective mediums, and there's a lot of evidence to prove that, I think ultimately people are trying to find better ways to ultimately capitalize or monetize those assets. If you're in the seller side, or if you're on the brand side, find the right inventory that you need. And that's created spurs of innovation as people ultimately try and find ways to do that without the impact of their P&L that they're seeing in cost inflation in the general marketplace.
Yeah. Stephen, let me go over to you because I think, we talked about kind of unpacking the language of addressable and programmatic. Stephen, at Dish, you are one of the original gangsters of the space of serving the right ad to the right consumer in television. And now, in a sense, that model is playing out across all forms of television, and CTV being kind of the digital native version of that. But let's start with you, if you would, describe what does addressable TV mean to you, and how are you answering that question to your clients of, how to reach the right consumer on television?
Well, I mean, from a Dish perspective, we look at quite a few things here. I mean, we have the combination, we're lucky to have the combination of Sling and the set-top box. So we can do that. But to our client, it's more about, not being wasteful about what you're doing. It's about, that impression buying and buying the exactly who you want to reach and not have the wasted impression. And we see that across the board, where we see a lot of people who spend a lot of money on that, spray and pray methodology, where you do have a lot of that waste and you're really not reaching everybody you need to reach. So this is the impetus of addressable, is where, you're hitting a finite audience, but you're being more effective about your message.
Chris, now let's bring in the automation side of the conversation, right? How does programmatic, if you would now describe how the technology is moving and the innovation that Brad mentioned at the beginning. What does innovation and automation look like in this world of both, linear that is becoming addressable, but also in the world of CTV?
Yeah, I think one thing we've seen, there's been a general reluctance in the past for publishers to lean into this notion of kind of automation or programmatic. It's like this boogeyman that's just bad. And I think what we've seen over the last year is an acceleration, I think Brad mentioned, towards innovation with an eye on greater flexibility and agility, right? One of the things that we've been hard at work at over the last 3 years is how do you bring the piping together on the media owner side to be able to allow for that flexibility and agility. And that's really hard work that largely publishers weren't leaning into in the past as aggressively as maybe they could have. We've seen a rapid acceleration towards more automated workflows over the last year, for sure.
Let's talk about for a second, again, thinking of the brands and the buyers in the room. When people say the word programmatic, there's an immediate leap to exchange-based, open RTB. The television world is a bit different, and Brad, maybe I could have you unpack that a little bit further, because when you think about deal types, what's important for the folks that are watching this to understand the current state of inventory types and transactional models?
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting because we're on the cusp of really finding the ways to truly make national linear TV dynamically ad inserted through programmatic pipes, right? I think some of the people on this call are at the forefront of really enabling that capability through DSPs accordingly. But I like the level set first. Like, what do we mean by programmatic TV? A lot of times people say that term, they're really about streaming TV, because that's actually real-time biddable inventory in a digital environment. Then there's data-driven linear, which is index-based buying in a one-to-many environment in national linear television. And then we have where we're on the very close to a tune right now with Project Or, where we can do dynamic ad replacement on the glass, where that's through a set-top box, like through partners like Dish, who are enabling it with certain publishers, or with Project Or that's doing it truly on the glass. But again, now it's about what inventory are we actually enabling that on. So we have to make sure, are we doing it with creative versioning? So changing our own spots that we already own, or are we actually dynamically replacing a spot, of which, what are we really replacing today? So whether that's promo spots that the network is be replaced, because I know Mr. Halvorson is not going to allow anybody to change his Oreo spot without his due notice if it's a separate advertiser, right? So I think there's a lot of nuance. Well, right. Maybe at a lower CPM, but we'll talk about that.
Negotiable.
Exactly. But I think that's where this is going to be really interesting. I think we're at a point today where there's a lot of things we can be testing and learning, and there's a lot of capabilities, but I think level setting on what the mass scale is with it, because I think there's still a lot more on the testing phase than we are in the mass rollout stage of this right now.
Hey, John, Brad just called you out on this. In a way, the use case of a house of brands with multiple, products and brands, and the need to be more flexible. Could you kind of describe, like, if you were to take the customer journey with a brand, it might be one of your emerging brands, or it might be, one of the really well-established brands. What does the opportunity for addressability mean for you, and those brands?
I mean, as far back as when I was on the agency side working with P&G, circa 2007, 2009, we always dreamed of the day in television we could buy the spot, a national broadcast spot. And at that time, the ratings were, upper single digits, now it's, not these like ones and twos. And we would carve it out, and you would say, moms will get Tide and new moms will get Pampers, and these guys will get this, and we'll perfectly allocate all of our inventory and there won't be any waste. And I think, CPG and portfolio companies, uniquely P&G and Unilever are a whole nother league of big and have brands that service the total need. They can probably eat up that whole inventory. Most advertisers of my size can't perfectly allocate that in the same way a large CPG could. But I think that the potential is really, how do you be really intentional about what you're doing? And I think to what we talked about earlier is this mass media approach of just spray and pray it doesn't going to really serve us well. And to some extent, it's been enabled by a marketplace that's based, and I benefit uniquely because of craft low bases to be able to work in that space. But I think television is proven to be an effective medium. The question is how versus other channels, how do we get there? And I think there's also something interesting what Brad talked about. I got exhausted just listening, to all the different types. There's OTTV, IPTV, ATV. I'm so glad I'm not in an agency and I have to keep up with this because it would kill me. Like, how do you put all the acronyms in the deck? You have to answer questions from clients who are like, well, what is that? What is this versus BVOD versus AOD? And what's the difference? And I think there's an unnecessary complexity to our infrastructure and language that is going to limit our potential. And I think some simplification is going to be needed, because I don't know if we all know what we're talking about, or there's a lack of a common language that will hold this industry back.
Yeah. So Stephen and Christopher, you probably, both of your companies are about simplifying supply and exposing it to demand and doing it with an easy button. So is it just, are we just talking about digital television here? Is that kind of the best way to encapsulate that? Chris, how do you explain that and simplify for, obviously Mondelēz has been doing this for a while, but say there's a new brand that's watching us right now. How do you tell them, hey, you might have some great customer, learnings and data. I want to help you bring it to television, and we can do it with a similar model of programmatic. How do you simplify that for a new, a brand that's new to the space?
Yeah, I don't think you totally simplify it today. I think Halvo does a great job of always getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for 20 years really well. It's just super complex. And I don't think about digital think of it as digital TV. I think about it as television. And it shouldn't matter to a brand whether that television or that consumer is watching that content via an IP connection or a set-top box, or frankly, a broadcast stream. It just shouldn't matter. What they should be able to do is buy that seamlessly in an automated fashion with a level of targeting and ultimately the ability to really realize outcomes based on that dollar that they spend. And I think in order to get to that place, there has to be unified technology across the ecosystem. Otherwise, it just continues to be this mess, this executional mess that largely it has been for the last 50 years. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity now for us to simplify the technology to allow people like Brad and John and content owners to really do what they do best, which is build great content, build great advertising, and deliver that seamlessly to the right audience. Yeah. This has been it's been an infrastructure problem.
Yeah.
I would like to jump on top of that. It is absolutely, and I think we've done a lot of talking and not enough doing up until this point, and that's kind of what kills me every time is that we want to expose our inventory wherever the buyer is, whether you want to buy programmatically, addressably, or whatever. But at the same time, you want to do that to what Chris is saying is in a simplified fashion. I want to expose ourselves in a marketplace that is easy to buy, whether it's addressable or programmatic. I want to take my set-top box inventory and throw it in with a connected TV inventory. It all serves the same purpose. We should just be able to be exposed to the buyer to buy whatever they want.
And by the way, I would add on to that, let's not throw out non-addressable linear as an unimpactful vehicle, right? It just should all be automated and easy.
Yep.
It's so funny because for years, I think people were prognosticating, that television was on this eventual decline and would eventually go away. And I don't think that's the case. It's not that TV is going anywhere, it's everywhere. And what is that really going to look like? And I think building off of what you said though, Stephen, is like, we need to take ownership of these issues.
Yeah.
And I think a lack of ownership of issues will slow down the progress that we have there. I mean, by any standard, TV data is just dumb. I mean, it's just dumb. And that distant in a lot of ways from the consumer. And it's funny because I think this digital standard of recency and efficacy is being imposed to television, and it's not fit for format. And we're having problems, but like there needs to be ownership of the issue. And instead we keep trying to transact and go or theorize. It's like ownership mindset is required here, or we will kill a future marketplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think it gets really interesting because, again, going back to my activation roots and how do we actually bring this to life, whether it's data-driven linear, which we coined dentsu, which is just another acronym to Mr. Halvorson's point. We like to add more acronyms to this industry, which is data-enabled linear TV activation. I know it's a beautiful one, though. It's good.
Oh, boom.
But I think, here's the reality of it though, right? What we're talking about is we have to own those problems. We have to enable this to then actually make it actionable, but we still fall back to legacy things that we have to deliver on when we say the word television. We have a legacy CPM against an age and gender, yet we're trying to talk about a strategic audience that we're trying to deliver against. And Stephen, over at Dish, how many times have you heard the CPM of addressable TV it's just not going to be worth our time because it's just nowhere near going to pass the procurement line. I think we have to focus in on something you said earlier, Mr. Halvorson, which is effectiveness. We have to focus in on the effectiveness of the mediums and how we're measuring what we're activating to prove why this is a justification on a CPM. I don't think the CPM model goes away, but I think we have to rework that a lower CPM doesn't necessarily drive the effectiveness we need. Now, certain reports, whether it's an MM report, may say that's the absolute best, but let's look at it on a strategic audience and then look at the actual holding the media more accountable. That's where it gets really excited for me on what we can do, whether it's national, addressable, and dynamically ad inserting, or doing creative versioning. Let's look at what the actual impact is to your media and measuring it at a higher level, a raw reach against an age, gender, buy.
So Brad, I heard in that point right there, something that probably, it's kind of an elephant in the room, which is, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? The CPM that you might be paying for in addressable or in CTV, the reality is that there's a shifting of audiences and there's a shifting of supply and demand. So where are we in the maturity curve of everyone thinking about effectiveness within the CPM, right? Is effective CPM or effective frequency even part of the conversation now, and should it be?
I mean, it absolutely should be. I mean, I think it's always, something we're always striving for. We always want additional reach against our audiences, but I think every audience is differently. I think we're all, and every client, every agency, we're all on a different journey on that path of how we're evaluating our media, focusing more, whether it's on audiences or just a holistic reach and frequency. But I think the effectiveness is definitely coming more to the forefront when you have less eyeballs on the traditional glass, but more eyeballs on the glass in general. I think that's what we're all saying here. More people are watching TV than ever before. They're just watching it differently. So how do we make sure we're reaching all of them and then measuring that to then put the holistic buy together to quantify those costs that are starting to be mediums? TV is not cost as it was a couple of years ago, but like Halvorson said a little earlier, back in the day, you can get high single digit ratings a bunch of years ago. Today, that's a really difficult thing to find, but we still need to reach the same amount of audiences. So how do we do that? You have to diversify your mix, which then makes it a little bit more difficult to connect the dots and then how you're going to actually bring that to life in a holistic video strategy.
Hey, John, I want to get this, your POV on this. So going back to your house of brands, you have these, you have emerging brands, Dirt Kitchen, Milligram, Rocket. Are you measuring effectiveness for these kind of, brands that need to tell not only a brand story, but also perform? How are you measuring that in the mix of inventory that we're talking about here, right?
I mean, look, I think brands of the ones that you cited or that small don't usually start onto television. I mean, television is not where you launch into some of those particular brands. I mean, you're not going to see us roll out, television for Dirt Kitchen. That's a DTC brand we're cultivating. I think, but it speaks to the question you kind of asked, which is, what's the role of it in the mix? I think it's worth the squeeze. Like, if you ask me, like, why is connected television, the higher CPMs, worth it? The answer is empirically yes. The issue, television's problem isn't the ability to prove value. It's we all know it's more effective. The challenge is to prove the value of it. Like, intuitively, we know. I pay one of the lower television bases in the universe, and I can still see there's a value of that shift. Because if we continue on this path based on where television advertiser demand is relative to supply, I feel that ceiling of ROI in television getting lower and lower. And if we do not go into a connected television universe, apply things like machine learning and AI over time to more strategically allocate inventory to brands, there won't be a need for it. So this is a must do. I don't see how you can be a responsible brand leader today, see what happened in last year's upfront, and A, not have done something before said, and B, if you didn't do something, or if you did, you probably didn't do enough. So as you sit here and probably had a very fun conversation with your CFO, where they talk to you about why you paid said inflation on television, you have approximately 9 months to get your act in gear and figure out what you're going to do. And I advise you to sit down with these nice people at your agency and get your butt in gear to make that happen. This isn't a nice to do. This isn't a test and learn thing. You need to go make a move in that market. And I think if you're testing and learning, you have a problem right now, and you are not thinking big enough about the change that we are facing.
Yeah, there's a right sizing conversation here.
And it's not incremental. I think the challenge will be clients who approach this with an incremental mindset are going to have a real problem because the market is not moving incrementally. 20% television inflation, or you wake up to the UK, publicly has been reported in many things is over 30%. Like, that is not incremental change. And therefore you cannot think incrementally about how you go to how to market.
Yeah. Chris, how do you, and you think about the kind of evolution of these marketplaces and these worlds coming together, linear and digital and CTV. What's the state of reporting look like from your perspective to make it easier for John and easier for Brad? What are you asking your measurement partners to bring to the table at this point, and recognizing that the sands are shifting under the old model.
Yeah. John, what does it take for you to get a report on a linear TV buy today? Is that weeks?
Yeah, weeks. I mean, you get like the overnight ratings and things like that, but you're still posting later. It's still weeks, you know?
So what we're driving to, as a company here, as we continue to scale our deployments, is an environment where through automated pipes, you can get reporting on delivery in hours. And we're doing that today. We're not at the scale that someone like a brand, like Mondelēz would need, but that's quickly coming. And I think that's where ultimately, we ultimately get to, is a point where the same kind of reporting capabilities that are capable through an IP connection, I don't care if it's a banner or search or CTV, should be available in linear TV. And I would say, I don't have a great answer for you on what that means in terms of attribution yet, because I think I think there's a number of interesting things happening on the attribution side today. But until those pipes are unified and the data can flow seamlessly, it's going to be really hard to simplify attribution. Yeah. But I do think it's coming. I just think it's a byproduct of greater automation.
And that's the kicker there, is we need a platform that can do that for attribution, in a sense, where it does it for the agency and the brands, so that it is one place to go to, so that you can see an overall story and see it fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. And again, I don't mean to go highlight my own stuff here at Dentsu. We have partnered with, our Delta product is powered by VideoAmp, and I bring them up because VideoAmp ultimately has a different panel that allows you to do a lot more attribution in the national linear TV. So that gives us an opportunity to kind of add some more attribution to national linear, understanding its index base is one-to-many medium versus that one-to-one. We know, Stephen, when you run a dish campaign, I know I'm getting my addressable TV attribution at a very deterministic level. It's absolutely phenomenal. But when I think about data-driven linear and our Delta product, we're going to take that panel, we're going to normalize it, we're going to knock it down. We can overlay a lot more learnings at a larger panel that's over 11 plus million people deterministically, but across over 24 million devices, 24 million households and 34 million devices. So I think there's ways in which we can make linear TV more actionable and attributable. But I think as Christopher's rolling out a lot more at Beachfront and how we're really connecting the dots to a lot more inventory, you're going to see this be more at the forefront of what's coming down the pipeline. We can do some really great things today, but what we're working on for tomorrow is going to make this a lot more actionable. And to something Chris said that's really important is that more near-time, real-time information coming through in TV. Because a lot of times we all know TV doesn't get that attribution that it deserves. A lot of times it's, that last click attribution, that banner ad that gets it or on the buy it. TV plays a huge role in that customer journey to purchase. When you're going down the aisle, you're seeing that ad over and over again. When you go down aisle, it puts that product on the top of mind. So I think getting a little bit more insight to how TV is contributing and being attributed to your buys, it's there. It's just getting better as we really go further down with this innovation.
Yeah. You mentioned seeing the ad over and over again. And, folks that might be watching this, there's a perception that, and some of it true, that there is a frequency management problem across this. And it all goes again to that issue of do we have the connective tissue across these different viewing platforms, across the different supply, paths, et cetera. Let me ask a kind of future question related to that is, what do you each imagine the future ad experience to be like as addressability and programmatic become more mature? Maybe John, start with you because you've got to get it right for the brands.
Oh, I have such high hopes and dreams, and then they're gonna just get like shattered on the beaches of reality. Oh gosh, I mean, look, yes, it's true. It's that I think what my hope for the future of this all would be is not like you talk about it in the lens of the ad experience. I kind of look at it the lens of what would I like the industry to look like. I would like it to have a collaborative spirit where we ultimately work to disable a lot of these walled gardens so that we can do this seamless measurement. I think there's a harmonization so that I'm not having to deal with all the acronyms or whatever else people are going to add to my life by the end of the day. And I just want it to be a lot simpler. I think when you simplify things, it drives understanding, and ultimately we get to scale. There'll be this temptation for every brand to give this answer around personalization, and no one is bigger on personalization with me. I try and lead in this space in CPG, but I think sometimes we get a little too cute with this. And I've seen some really cool stuff in Brazil. We're doing scans of the last 3 minutes of content and serving up a recipe based on where it's there, and it's nice and I like it. But I don't need that. I just need a simpler marketplace that I can deliver at scale, and I would be delighted. But I think right now my nirvana starts on what that marketplace looks like, and I think that leads to a better consumer experience where ultimately they are getting reached with the right number of times and better messaging, and it drives better creative. That's what I would hope for, but I think it starts on the marketplace side.
Yeah, and the collab. And certainly collaboration as a through line. Chris, what does as connective tissue gets better, what's your hope for bringing automation and right ad to the right screen?
Yeah, I think to John's point, it's a global marketplace where the buying and selling and advertising is real time, it's seamless, and and you can measure outcomes against it. And I think that we can get there technically. It's whether or not the industry is going to come together to allow the data to flow and the reporting to flow in a way that we can get there, in actuality. And those aren't small hurdles to cross, but we live in the world. We are deeply ingrained with the MVPDs. We're deeply entrenched with the glass manufacturers, and I think what we've seen over the last few years is a much greater willingness to collaborate, and that gives me hope.
Yeah, Brad, over to you. How are we going to collaborate better?
I think that word, right? That's the crux of this. I mean, we have to have better collaboration for this to truly come to life. I think about the idea of programmatic TV and national TV. I think at Dish, why does it work so seamlessly? Because you have access to all the cable networks and the local breaks. On the national linear TV side, what Chris is setting up, I need to bring all the inventory together, and then I either have to own it or dynamically replace into it. So we need more collaboration to actually get the scale on the inventory to enable that type of addressability across the board for said national inventory. So yeah, what both these guys said summed it up really well. Nirvana is actual collaboration across the board, connecting the dots across one holistic buy and let the data flow seamlessly through and knock down the walled gardens to have a true unified reporting of how we're delivering. That's the perfect state, but I think it all starts and rooted in collaboration.
Yeah. Stephen, what roadblocks do you want to see pushed away? You're talking to the folks that own the supply. They must see the promise of, better addressability to more inventory. That's going to help the marketplace overall. But what roadblocks do you think we need to remove to make that possible?
Well, I think there's, as you may know, Dish is working toward programmer enablement, meaning we're looking to help the programmers light up their inventory as well. Our theory here is and I'm going to use an overused metaphor in our industry, is rising tides lifts all boats. And we believe that we need to scale. And the second part of that is we need we need platforms, we need people to ease the execution of that and have one entry point for agencies or brands so that they can see all of that. So right now our roadblock is technology and working together. And we've said this 1,000 times just here, is collaboration. And we need those technologies and we need to collaborate because everybody's got to stop doing the walled gardens. Everybody's got to stop hoarding their own inventory and putting it all together so that people can buy easier and execute.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, and my last request, John, speaking to your mission as well, can we have a few less acronyms? Let's just see if we can pull that off like in the next 3 years. I think if we don't, it's true. Those acronyms mean nothing to our audiences. So how can we make that, reality of TV?
They confuse the marketplace. I can't,
Exactly.
It's unapproachable. It's unapproachable. Can you imagine sitting down? Like, this is where I go to it is the C-suite would kick our ass. Literally go walk into a CMO or a CEO's office and go try and explain this to him and see how fast you get thrown out on your butt. You know, like there's no time for that. So I know that we all like to be smart and look interesting and be cute, but like simplify this. And I think it's ownership of issues. All of, to your point, the technology can be built. We can solve for these other things, but it requires ownership and focus. So how will we come together as an industry to own our issues and solve them? Because if not, we will continue the proliferation, and we've seen where this goes. I have seen this movie on many different places where we don't take ownership. We go in 1,000 directions and we break the toy.
Yeah.
And I'm really quick on that. There's something that I have seen that's a little bit different that even just being at Ad Week and having a different conversation is people like myself and other agencies like Publicis, like GroupM, we're all saying, hey, there's a common goal that we all have in this industry that we want to move towards and we all need to do together. And from an agency perspective, we're all going to have our little secret sauce, but there's a common goal that we all need to come together on. And I think that is clear. And I think that's the difference. At least we're talking about now, just like you're saying, Mr. Halvorson, the same thing we're saying on the sales side and the tech side. We all need to work together on this, but we're all saying it together for the first time, as opposed to just trying to hoard and create our own little pockets just for that differentiator.
All right. I think we've got a light towards the tunnel. Let's get there. Thank you, everybody. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you, Brad Stockton from Dentsu, John Halvorson from Mondelēz, Stephen Jutras, Dish, and Chris Maccaro from Beachfront. Thank you all. This has been extraordinary. And everybody watching, we'll see you at the next session. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.